Steph, Caregivers Chronicles Unveiled, the critical care unit for caregivers. Real conversations, real care, real healing. Doc Steph, I see your hands holding the weight of 100 plans. Soft in the dark, strong in the light. You make it feel a little more right. Take a breath.
Hey, most of us imagine caregiving as an expression of love and compassion, but what happens when the person receiving our care says or does things that hurt us? Sometimes those wounds come from a history that predates caregiving. Other times, illness changes someone we love into someone we barely recognize. And for professional caregivers, it may come from caring for people we have just met who respond with anger, fear, or aggression. So, how do we care with compassion without pretending the hurt does not exist? Let's talk about it. And welcome to Caregivers Chronicles Unveiled. This is episode 11, When Caring Hurts. I am your host, Doc Steph. And some of the most difficult conversations in caregiving are the ones we never have out loud. Caregiving often requires us to keep moving forward, even when we have thoughts and emotions we do not quite know how to put into words. There are some realities we discuss openly, and there are others we quietly keep to ourselves because we are not sure how they will be understood. One of those realities is what happens when the relationship itself becomes part of the struggle. For some caregivers, the relationship was already complicated long before caregiving began. For others, illness, injury, or disease changes the person they have always known and loved. Professional caregivers may find themselves caring for people who fear, whose fear and confusion, pain, or illness is expression or expressed through anger, rejection, or aggression. These are not easy conversations, but they are real conversations. And if we are going to care for the whole person, we also have to acknowledge the whole caregiver. So today, we are going to have an honest conversation about what it means to continue caring with compassion when caring hurts. Um, One of the greatest misconceptions about caregiving is that compassion and hurt cannot coexist. We sometimes assume that if we genuinely care about another person, their words or actions should not affect us. But caregiving often teaches us something different. It is possible to care deeply for someone and still be wounded by the relationship. Those two realities do not cancel each other out. They simply remind us that caregivers are human. We do not stop having emotions because we choose to care for another person. Whether the hurt comes from years of unresolved history, from watching illness change someone we love, or from repeatedly caring for people whose suffering is expressed through anger or aggression. The emotional impact is real. Ignoring it does not make it disappear. Acknowledging it does not make us less compassionate, especially with loved ones that have hurt you in the past. Perhaps one of the most important steps we can take is permitting ourselves to be honest about what we are experiencing. Healing begins with truth, and truth allows us to care for others without losing sight of our own humility or humanity, I meant to say. Although the hurt may feel similar, it does not always come from the same place. For some caregivers, the pain has deep roots. Caregiving may require them to step into a relationship marked by years of disappointment, conflict, rejection, or emotional wounds. The responsibilities of caregiving do not erase that history. Instead, they often bring those unresolved experiences back to the surface. For others, the relationship itself was never the problem. Illness, injury, or disease gradually changes the personality, behavior, or abilities of someone they have always known and loved. The person standing before them may look familiar, yet the relationship no longer feels the same. In many ways, they find themselves grieving someone who is still physically present. So, professional caregivers experience another reality. They often care for people whose fear, pain, confusion, or illness is expressed through anger, resistance, and aggression. While they understand these behaviors are often symptoms of deeper struggles, that understanding does not prevent the words or actions from having an emotional impact on us. The circumstances may differ, but the question many of us quietly carry is remarkably similar. How do I continue caring without letting the hurt change the way I care for them? Caregiving often places us in situations where another person's behavior can influence our own. We cannot always control how someone speaks to, responds to, or treat us. We cannot always change the effects of illness, the pain someone is carrying, or the history that has shaped the relationship. Those realities may be outside our control. What remains within our control is how we choose to respond. Responding with compassion does not mean pretending the hurt does not exist. It does not mean excusing harmful words or unhealthy behavior, nor does it require us to ignore appropriate boundaries. Instead, compassion allows us to acknowledge the reality of the hurt while making a thoughtful decision about how we will continue to care. In many ways, caregiving becomes an opportunity to practice integrity. Our care is no longer determined solely by another person's behavior. It is guided by our values, our character, and our commitment to care for one another, even when the relationship is difficult. Every caregiving relationship has the potential to influence us. The question is not whether we will be affected. The question is, what will we do with those experiences? Hurt has a way of tempting us to become guarded, resentful, or emotionally distant. Those responses are understandable, but they do not have to define the way we care. Caring with compassion is not about pretending painful experiences never happen. It is about making the daily decision that another person's behavior will not determine the values by which we choose to live. Compassion, wisdom, and healthy boundaries can exist together. So can honesty and grace. In the end, caregiving is not only revealed by what we do for another person, it is also revealed by the integrity with which we choose to do it. Now, as far as this conversation, it reminds me of a book I wrote called Caregiving for the Enemy. When I first started writing it, I was writing out of my hurt. I was angry. In my mind, the enemy was the person I was caring for. Then someone asked me a question that completely changed my perspective. They asked me, "Who is the enemy?" She said, "When I think about caregiving, I think about love. When I think about an enemy, I think about hate. How can those two exist in the same relationship?" I had to stop and really think about that. As I reflected on the question, I realized my mother was not the enemy. The real battle was with the unresolved pain I had carried with me since childhood. I brought a lot of baggage into caregiving, and without realizing it, that pain influenced the way I cared for her. My mother had been verbally abusive before caregiving began, and she continued to speak to me that way throughout much of the caregiving journey. I cannot tell you how many times I found myself torn between doing what I believed was morally right and doing only what I wanted. I was ripped apart on the inside, but I kept coming back because I believed it was the right thing to do in God's eye. At the same time, I had my own issues with abandonment. No matter how badly she treated me, I did not want to abandon her the way I knew abandonment could affect a person's life. Eventually, I realized I needed to be honest. I shared with my mother how deeply her words had affected me, and I prayed constantly. I cannot say everything changed overnight, but I did begin to see changes in the way she spoke to me. And looking back, I understand that caregiving revealed more than my mother's needs. It was revealing the unresolved pain I had been carrying for years. As God began healing those wounds, I found myself caring from a different place, not because the past had disappeared, but because I was no longer allowing it to define every moment of the present. So I want to and hopefully encourage you throughout today's conversation that we have discussed how we respond when caring becomes painful. I want to share with you some scriptures that remind us that this is not a new struggle. In Genesis 20, verses 5 through 6, God acknowledges Abimelech's integrity of heart. That passage reminds us that integrity is not determined by whether life is easy. The condition of our hearts is revealed when life becomes difficult. I just want to put this disclaimer out there. I'm not trying to force religion on anyone. I am just sharing the things that helped me get through this whole process. Because when you think of 15 years, that is a lot of years. And I'm just sharing that with you. You can look these scriptures up if you want and if you like. But I just want to share the interpretation that I got from it. And I hope it helps you. Because Jesus takes us even further in Luke chapter 6, verse 27 through 36, where he tells us to love our enemies, do good to those who hate us, bless those who curse us, pray for those who mistreat us, and be merciful just as our Father is merciful. He is not asking us to pretend hurt does not exist. He is showing us that our response does not have to be determined by another person's behavior. Paul, the author, continues that thought in Romans chapter 12, verse 17 through 21. Paul is the author of this text, encouraging us not to repay evil for evil, but to overcome evil with good. That does not mean we ignore painful words, excuse healthy behavior, or abandon healthy boundaries. It means we choose not to let hurt define how we care. When we place these passages together, they give us a beautiful picture of what integrity looks like in difficult relationship. So if we go back, Genesis 20, verses 5 through 6, integrity begins in the heart. Luke chapter 6, verse 27 through 36, integrity is expressed in how we respond to difficult people. And then Romans chapter 12, verses 17 through 21, that we just discussed as well, integrity is sustained by refusing to let evil dictate our response. So integrity, compassion, and wisdom can exist together. As caregivers, we will not always be able to choose our circumstances, but with God's help, we can choose the spirit in which we respond. So, as we close today's conversation, remember this: not every caregiving relationship is easy, and not every hurt is quickly resolved. Some relationships may never become what we hope they would be. Yet, even in those moments, we still have a choice about the kind of person we want to be. So, caring with integrity does not mean we ignore our pain, excuse harmful behavior, or pretend difficult relationships do not exist. It means We choose not to allow those experiences to determine the way we care for others or the condition of our own hearts. If today's conversation reflects your story, I hope you will permit yourself to acknowledge both your compassion and your hurt. You do not have to deny one to prove the other. As you continue your caregiving journey, ask yourself this question: Am I allowing my pain to define the way I care, or am I allowing God to continue his work within me? So thank you for joining me for another episode of Caregivers Chronicles Unveiled. Until next time, remember this: caring with compassion begins with a heart committed to integrity. Peace and blessings.
Real conversations, real care, real healing.